Hi, welcome back once again to CBSE Board Economics. I'm Saddam Hussain here. You recollect, some time back we were discussing balance of payments and balance of trade. Today we'll continue with the same topic. Balance of payment has two components. One is current account of balance of payment, and the second one is capital account of balance of payment. We'll discuss what all the components of both these accounts, current account and components, and capital account, and what are its components. So once again I repeat, what are the components of balance of payment? Balance of payment has two components. One is current account, the other one is capital account. Let's discuss what exactly is current account. Current account, the name suggests, deals something to do with the economic transactions of the country with the rest of the world. In current account means day-to-day transactions with the rest of the world in terms of exports and imports of goods and services. So what exactly is current account is the difference between exports and imports of both visible and invisible items in the balance of payments. Visible items we call them as goods, and invisible items in balance of payment we call them as services. So current account is the difference between exports and imports of both visible and invisible items. So we'll be discussing its minute components of visible and invisible items. So let's see all the components of current account. So the current, we'll discuss before we go to the components. The current account can be balanced, the current account can be positive, the current account can be negative. Or we can put it in the other way, the current account can be positive, negative and balanced. The current account we can say as favorable when it is positive. The current account is unfavorable when it is negative. The current account is balanced when it is zero. When do you have the positive current account? The positive current account implies that exports of both visible and invisible items are greater than imports of both visible and invisible items. There's a value of exports of invisible and invisible items are greater than invisible value of imports of visible and invisible items. When do you have negative current account balance of payment? There will be negative or unfavorable current account of balance of payments when the value of imports of visible and invisible items are greater than the value of exports of both visible and invisible items. When is the current account balance of payment is balanced or zero? The current account balance of payments is zero or balanced when the value of exports and imports of visible and invisible items are equal to the value of imports of visible and invisible items. I hope you got the brief introduction about current account. Current account in the balance of payment is the difference between exports and imports of both visible and invisible items. We discussed it. Visible items are goods and invisible items are services. Current account balance of payments can be positive, can be negative, can be balanced. And let's go to discuss the components of current account. We can put the components of current account as eight components, or you can sum up all these 8 components into 4 components only. How do we do it? We'll see it right now. What are the components of current account of balance of payment? The first one, you have exports of goods. We call them as visible items, exports of goods. Goods in terms of what do we export from India? This can be in terms of jute, this can be in terms of cloth, it can be in terms of any other components. That is the current, exports of good, visible items. It can be iron ore, it can be jute, it can be cotton fabrics. That's exports of goods. And number 2 is imports of goods. What do we import? We import almost virtually everything. We import cars, we import gold, we import mobile phones, we import a lot of things from abroad. That's the goods, visible items. So we can club them together, exports and imports of goods. We learned it already. We call them as balance of trade, BOT, balance of trade. So we can call it as net exports, BOT, balance of trade. It's the difference between exports and imports of visible items, or we can call them as goods. And let's carry on with the components of the current account. The third component of current account is exports of services, invisible item. These services can be banking services, this can be trade, this can be commerce, this can be shipping services, this can be airlines, and this can be tourism services. Exports and imports of services, that's also invisible items. We can club these two together as balance of invisible trade, balance of invisible trade. And mind it here, balance of trade can be positive, can be negative, can be zero, balanced. Balance of trade can be favorable, unfavorable, or can be zero. Same way, balance of invisible trade can be positive, can be negative, can be balanced, can be favorable, can be unfavorable, can be balanced. And now we carry on with the components of balance of current account. And the unilateral transfers received from abroad. What are the unilateral transfers? These can be in terms of gifts. These can be in terms of other things which we are getting from abroad. Gifts. Right? India receives remittances from abroad. Many Indians are permanently staying abroad. They keep sending money to India. So that is unilateral transfers, or we call them as transfer payments from abroad. At the same time, unilateral transfers paid to abroad. We also pay to other countries. So we take the difference between these two. We can call them as current transfers from rest of the world. Current transfers from rest of the world. Transfers received minus transfers paid to abroad. We carry on. Mind it, this can be positive, this can be negative, this can be balanced. Keep that in mind. And the last two things we have, factor payments received from abroad. We are getting many Indians stay temporarily abroad. They are working there. They send money to India. We are getting here foreign exchange. And many foreigners come and work in India, we pay to them, so they take the difference. That's a factor payments received from abroad, factor payments. So we can call them as NFIFA, net factor income from abroad. Mind it, NFI, net factor income from abroad, can be positive, can be negative, can be balanced, NFIA. So we sum it up once again, carefully follow this once again. Balance of payments. Balance of payment is the difference between exports and imports of all visible items, invisible items, current transfers, factor incomes, factor payments. That is, to put it in simply, all the economic transactions a country has with the rest of the world. Right? So that's a balance of payment. Balance of payment has two components. Number 1, current account of balance of payment. Number 2, capital account of balance of payment. We are discussing now current account of balance of payment. What is current account of balance of payment? Current account of balance of payment is the difference between exports and imports of both visible and invisible items. So this includes, it has 8 components, or we can put them as 4. What are the 8 components? Exports of goods, imports of goods, exports of services, import of services, unilateral transfers received from abroad, unilateral transfers paid to abroad, factor incomes from abroad, factor payments made to abroad. So to put these 8 components into 4, we can take 2 at a time. Net exports of visible items, or BOT, balance of trade. This has 2 things, exports of goods, imports of goods. Next 2 things we take it as net exports of invisible trade. invisible trade, that is services, exports of services minus import of services. Then you have unilateral transfers from abroad, this is the transfers received minus transfers paid to abroad. Then you have the last two, that is factor payments received and paid to abroad, that is NFI, net factor income from abroad, the 8 components it has. One thing you have to keep in mind here, in the when you are preparing the balance of payments account, whenever the dollars come inside the country, whenever the foreign exchange comes inside the country, we write it as positive items or credit items, because dollars have been credited. Foreign exchange is credit item, credit item, positive item. It's a positive, good for the country, positive, we write it as positive, plus value. Whenever we pay foreign exchange or dollars to other countries for importing goods, we write it as negative items because the dollars or foreign exchange has gone from the country. Negative, or we call it as debit item in balance of payment, negative minus item. So that keep in mind, whenever the dollars come inside the country, we call it as positive item or credit item. Whenever the dollars go from outside the country or foreign exchange, we can call it as, we write it as negative item or debit item in balance of payment. So revision, to sum it up, we say in simple words, balance of payments has 2 components, current account and capital account. Current account is the difference between exports and imports of visible and invisible items a country has with the rest of the world. It has 8 components: exports of goods, import of goods, exports of services, import of services, unilateral transfers received from abroad, unilateral transfers paid to abroad, factor incomes received from abroad, and factor payments made to abroad. To put it into 4 components, balance of payments has 4 components. Balance of trade, that is exports and imports of the goods, visible items. Balance of invisible trade, exports and imports of invisible items, services. Then unilateral net transfers from rest of the world, and net factor income from abroad. So balance of payments, right? And the current account of balance of payments can be positive, negative, and balanced. Whenever the foreign exchange come inside the country, in the balance of trade or balance of payments, right, on the current account or capital account, we write it as a positive or credit item. Whenever we pay foreign exchange to other countries, we write it as negative item or debit item in balance of trade. That's all we have time for today's class. Till we meet next time, it's goodbye from Saddam Hussein. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like and comment. So best of luck for your exams.